the scope of work. So what we're planning on including within this residential project, our city's project goals for the entire project itself, and then our draft design proposal. And if you've received the letter, I think there you've seen some excerpts of what that might be. And we do have a full neighborhood plan to show you all. And I want to stress that this is a draft proposal, and this is kind of the beginning of this conversation. So we're looking from feedback from this group, and it is our starting point for discussion, so we could show you what the city would be proposing to meet some of the project goals from the city's perspective. But obviously, it's really important to get resident feedback and hear how this might work for you. So this is truly the beginning of the conversation for the Luella Anderson project. And I've got a little feedback on the line, so I'm just gonna mute everyone here.
You muted yourself, Liz.
Can you? Oh.
There we go. I can hear you now.
All right, I think I fixed the echo. Tried to fix my muting problem and made it worse.
All right. Can you guys hear me still?
Great. Yep.
There we go. All right. You'd think after a year into this, we'd have all the tech issues sorted out, but not so much. So yeah, two big things that we're talking about today for opportunities here is opportunities for green stormwater infrastructure, and then some questions around sustainable landscaping and what we might be able to have some different options in the boulevard. So can you go to the next slide for me, Nathan, please? Thank you. So for those of you who are on the phone, what we're looking at is a map of the Luella Anderson area and what the scope of work and the extents of the work are for this. I'm going to talk through it the best that I can. Nathan's going to help me out. But as I said, this should be up on the website for folks to take a look at. The big thing to know here is that this project was split into two phases. So the first phase is the 42nd Street East reconstruction, and that construction is has currently begun. I think there's a trailer and some signage out there, and the plan is for that to last through fall of 2021. And as we mentioned, Tracy will have the update on that project at the end. The main reason we're here to speak tonight is to talk about phase 2 of this project. So this is within the Luella Anderson neighborhood itself. This will be a renovation project. And what's included in that is select concrete panel replacement, some replacement of failing areas of curb and gutter, utility upgrades, intersection improvements, and I'll have some photos of what that looks like. But what that means is bringing our pedestrian ramps up to ADA, Americans with Disability Act standards, and shortening crossing distances with some bump outs to help with pedestrian safety. But I can show some photos for what that looks like. And then also looking at green stormwater infrastructure opportunities. Nathan, do you want to talk through kind of the extents of what we're looking at, and then mention some of the utility upgrades that are happening as well, and what folks may be able to expect from that scope of work?
Yeah, definitely. So as you see in this photo, I know some of you are on a phone call, but in this photo there are 3 different colors. First, the blue area is the main project area for phase 2 of this project. And like Liz had said, there are select concrete panel replacements, which you saw in the mailer. Those are those gray squares that are located throughout the corridor. But along with that treatment, there are other treatments that will be used in this process for concrete pavement restoration, or CPR for short. Those treatments are sawing and sealing of the joints, partial panel repair, full depth crack repair, and partial depth crack repair. A lot of words that go into that, but what that in essence means is we're going to be taking these roadways and, doing what we can to improve them and make them last another 20 years before we have to come back and fully, repave the roads. The second is the CenterPoint Energy gas improvements, which are in yellow. CenterPoint Energy has identified these areas as needing upgrades to their main lines and connections. With that, CenterPoint Energy will be sending out information on when they'll be there and when they will be starting. They plan to start in 2021. I don't know off the top of my head when that date will be. I haven't gotten confirmation on that, but they will be starting in 2021. The third is our orange color, which is the sanitary and storm sewer improvements. Mostly these are within the intersections, but there is a small portion from Edmond Boulevard through Falwell Drive that leads to the west. I believe it's a couple hundred feet that needs to be repaired. With that, our team in Surface Water and Sewer has identified these locations as needing improvement and repair. So they'll be out there at that time as well, but that'll be starting in 2022 as well. And with any construction project, these improvements will cause disturbance. I want to note that. And when this project gets closer to construction, we will address the schedule of work and have construction neighborhood meetings. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Nathan. You want to head to the next slide? Thanks. So from the city's perspective, city sets project goals based on our plans and policies. And, we'd be interested in if people think that these goals are the correct goals for this project and what your feedback are. But this is our starting point for how we evaluate where we're making improvements and what type of improvements we'd be making. So for the Luella Anderson project, we're looking to improve pedestrian safety and access, to improve street pavement condition, improve our utilities, and then seize opportunities for green stormwater infrastructure improvements. Nathan, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So as Nathan mentioned, as I said at the outset, the main way that will be, not the main way, the way we'll be improving the street surface through this project is through concrete panel replacement. And you can see here a picture of kind of what a street looked like beforehand, before we did concrete rehab up on the left-hand side, left top corner. The other picture kind of shows some action shots of the panels themselves actually being taken out. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is an example of a finished product. Could you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And this is what I mentioned about intersection improvements, which are also included in this project. I took a Google Street Shot view of what one of the intersections looks like today in the Luella Anderson area. You can see that there's no curve. You've got this metal, what we call truncated domes, which brings us up to ADA compliance. We'd be looking at replacing those corners and bringing those all up to standard along with this project. Next slide, please. One big thing I want to note here is that there are assessments related with this project, and those are going to be on a property by property basis. Assessments are calculated based on the amount of square footage of your property that abuts the construction area. And then we use a uniform assessment rate to calculate the amount that the city would be charging for this work. It's a fairly complicated process. I do have a link here for those who are on Teams with us to our special assessments website, which have some more information about how that's calculated. You can also contact our special assessment office with questions, and their phone number, and I can repeat that if people are interested in it, but I'm going to say it now slowly, is 612-673-2401. And they'd be happy to answer questions about the assessment process. There will be much more information about this. I just always want to mention it at the beginning of the project, so there's no surprises that there is assessments that come along with these types of street improvement projects. Nathan, can you maybe speak to some of the next steps and when those might occur and when people can expect to receive information?
Yep. So for assessments for the phase 2 of the project, you'll likely receive information early next year before the start of the following construction season for 2022. And with that, we'll be bringing along our assessment team to that meeting to discuss any questions you may have. If you haven't already discussed it with them, with the phone number that's listed here. So look for a mailer next year early.
Thanks. Can you head to the next slide, please? Oh, I think I hit that one already. There we go. So this is a segment, I believe this is what neighbors had received in the mail. And this shows the specific concrete panels that we would be replacing through this project. And maybe Nathan can speak to a little bit about, the way that it was decided which panels were done. I know there was a lot of technical work that went into this. But the main thing when we're talking about replacing, failing curb and gutter and taking opportunities to try and add in more green space to this area is that we are looking at creating those opportunities along the areas where we are taking out concrete panels. So it's most cost effective from the city's perspective. So for example, if you follow kind of that middle path along, is that Coffee? That'd be Coffee Lane. There's like a line of panels that we'd be taking out. We are pairing our locations where we can introduce green space with those locations, along the locations where we'd be replacing concrete panels. And so the way concrete rehab works, it is a lower, it's less impactful than a full reconstruction, and so we'd only be replacing certain sections of curb, and when we take out those panels along one long section of curb, that does give us the opportunity to go in and add in some more green spaces in those areas. So it's kind of the thought process behind how we selected some of these areas. And again, I want to stress that this is draft, so we're looking for feedback on what people have ideas about this. Can you go to the next slide for me, Nathan, please? Thank you. So these are just some examples of what this could look like. There's a range of options here, and there's kind of two big things that the city looks like when we're designing areas like this. And the first thing is looking at what we call green stormwater infrastructure. So that's going to be something that's designed out to truly capture stormwater and treat it as a alternative to sending stormwater into our pipe and tunnel system. And it has a lot of benefits. We're still working out on the design side exactly where we'll be able to put in some of those locations. So that's technical work that's still ongoing internally, but we're also looking at opportunities for sustainable plantings. So these would be areas where we would be introducing more green space, larger boulevards, and trying to gauge interest in this area. If folks might be interested in this as an option, I have two examples here of what that could look like, but there are a wide range of options. But what I do want to stress is that this would be specifically for the sustainable plantings themselves, is that there would be the maintenance would fall back onto the residents. And Allison, am I missing any big points on there besides that? So that's one thing I want to drive home, is the maintenance aspect of this, is that it would be a little different than turf grass, and that if we were to go with an option like this, it would be the responsibility of the homeowner or the property owner to be maintaining these type of plantings. But Allison, anything else you'd want to add to that?
Yep, that pretty much covers it. I think it's important to note that the picture on the bottom left is more of our native grasses that are really slow to grow and require, most of the time we typically see you would have to mow that less than your standard sod. So that would be very familiar maintenance that you're used to if you have standard sod. And then we could kind of punch it up with landscaping. That would be more of your typical weeding and spring and fall cleanup type maintenance. But of course we would support with any care needs and guidance to help you with that effort.
Thanks. You want to head to the next slide for me, Nathan, please? Okay, so this was another excerpt of the neighborhood. I know this does not show that what you received in the mail does not show the full neighborhood itself. Nathan, did that get up on the website before this call, or are we still waiting for some help to get that posted?
I believe so, but I'll confirm right now.
Okay, fantastic. And we can throw that in the chat box too, the exact link to that. Nathan, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of things at once. Can you head to the next slide for me too? I know you're probably typing up. Thank you. So just a little background on how and why we are looking at these types of improvements at Luella Anderson. So this map here shows a full map of the city of the areas where it is the highest priority areas to make investments in green infrastructure, where we know that these investments will do the most good. And it's a large combination of things that turn something green, which is like a high priority for area to make investments. But Allison, if you want to jump in for me and help me remember what hits this as a high priority area, but I know it's one big thing is the quality of the soils, also just the way in which things drain to different types of watersheds. But I'm sure you have a more succinct explanation of the green areas here.
Totally. You're absolutely saying the right things, but just the quickest way to think about this is that we looked at two big things: the suitability of the area. So how well can it take in stormwater? And that's things like having sandy soil to water through back into the ground really fast, not having high groundwater, because we obviously don't want to contribute to those issues that people might be experiencing. And then we also look at the impact factor. So does this area really need this type of treatment? And that would be things like water quality concerns or proximity to the river or a lake, or perhaps some flooding issues. So you can see here Luella Anderson is in yellow, which is right in the middle, which means it's likely hitting a little bit of both of those. And we'll, through technical work, we can understand a little bit more about the suitability. But the fact that it's showing up yellow means that it's definitely worth the investment. It's needing the investment, and it's worth us investigating.
Yeah, and if you head to the next slide for us, Nathan, you can see a zoom in of Luella Anderson. There you go. Yeah, so just kind of reinforcing what Allison just said here. You can see how Luella Anderson fits in and why we're looking at making these types of investments in this area. You want to head to the next slide for me, Nathan, please? So with every investment in the right-of-way, there is always a trade-off. And I want to be upfront with what the trade-off is here. I'd say this is these are the maximum locations where we'd be looking at putting in bump outs to try and treat stormwater and add more green space to the area. And the way we'd be doing that is that we would be removing on-street parking. So the bump outs themselves would go in where there's currently on-street parking. And Nathan, can you confirm for me that with this whole design, there would still be parking on one side of the street in all of these locations? Is that correct?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the map. I've been focused more on phase one. Sorry, I'll take a look at that real quick and get back to you. But
okay, so I would say in the large majority of these locations, we are not pinching down the street enough to say that there would be no parking on either side of the street. We typically try to keep parking at least on one side. But this table shows that we are looking at removing a range of parking depending again on where those opportunity areas are for replacement, from about 4 spots at the low end to 18 spots at the high end. And again, this is a starting point and likely the maximum parking removal that we would be showing for this area. One of the reasons that we do think this could be a workable option in Luella Anderson is that we do know that unlike a lot of places in Minneapolis, I think the large majority, if not all, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, if people don't have driveways, but there are residential driveways in this area for people to make sure they have options to park. But do want to be clear about the trade-off in design here as we are thinking of making a change to what's out there today. Could you head to the next one for me, please, Nathan? Thank you. So for this section of the project, next steps, so during spring of 2021, continuing to work on our concept design. So as I mentioned, that technical work internal to us is trying to figure out exactly where we will be able to put in green stormwater infrastructure, and then having ongoing conversations, emails. Abdullahi will return from paternity leave, have another conversation like this where we'd be coming back to give our final recommendation. But between then and now, really interested in hearing folks' feedback on the mid-back bump outs, as well as the sustainable plantings. And then looking at beginning our detailed design in summer of 2021. So Public Works would be making a recommendation sometime in the summer timeframe for this project to make a final decision about what the design, how it will be moving forward. Because once Public Works moves into detailed design, the curb line itself doesn't change. So really glad that there's a lot of folks on the call today, because now is the time to have these types of discussions and get your feedback and comments in, because after Public Works moves into detailed design, there isn't a lot of change to what you would see out there, or what you would end up seeing in the final product. And then last up, looking at early spring, starting construction for this process. So before we head into questions, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, and that's going to give me an opportunity to kind of scan through some of the questions that are already in the chat box. So Tracy, I'll turn it over to you for an update on 42nd Street.
Okay, if we could move to the next slide, please. Or maybe, oh, okay, here it is. And so what we're doing right now is we're getting ready to start with the sewer work. And so as part of the 42nd Street reconstruction, we'll be replacing both the sanitary and storm sewers. And so we'll be starting with the sanitary sewer any day now. We were looking at starting a couple of weeks ago, but then with the cold weather, we had some other infrastructure issues that created problems. And so the crew had to go fix those, and they're wrapping up the last one they need to do. And so they'll be over there within a couple of days. What this will mean is that the intersection of Edmond and 42nd will be closed for a couple of weeks. And so don't be surprised if that happens in a few days. And when that is done after 2 days, we'll be able to reopen the street, and we're going to replace the sanitary main on a short section of Edmond, just north of 42nd. And so when the sewer work is done on Edmond, then we'll move back over to 42nd and we'll replace both the sanitary and storm. And so we'll be coordinating that work with our internal paving crews. And so we'll be working together, and the paving can't happen until after the sewer work is done. And it's anticipated that the sewer work will finish at the end of the summer. And so we're looking at how we can overlap things and get that coordinated. And so we're planning on having substantial completion by the end of this construction season. To give you a heads up, there might be a potential for sidewalk work, plantings, and sodding to happen early on next construction season. Those are things that we like to do last. Obviously, with plantings, we want to make sure that we don't damage them. The same thing with sod. And so if it gets to be later in the year, we would postpone those things until the spring.
All right, Tracy, is that the end of the update? I'm sure folks might have some questions. All right, fantastic. So I think I'm going to start with a couple of the questions in the chat. So one, I saw someone asked if there any thought of burying electric lines, and unfortunately, even with our full reconstruction projects, burying electric lines is not within the scope of Public Works' reconstruction projects. So unfortunately, that will not be happening along with this project. There's a question about